What is the future of hazard pay under a second stimulus package? And do we have any more clarity today from the Republicans? Hey everybody, this is LALATE with a second stimulus check and stimulus package update for today. This one's about hazard pay, that $10,000 from the federal government which could be coming to you if the second stimulus package from the Democrats is approved. Today we have really breaking news about the future of hazard pay. It doesn't come from the Republicans, but comes from leading economists. And the situation is really quite fluid, so let's get right to the news. As you know, the future of hazard pay really lays in a second stimulus package. A lot of people are unhappy that a first stimulus package didn't provide for hazard pay. But the great news is what we've been detailing in recent days on this channel is that a lot of states have now been providing hazard pay. Hazard pay at the state or local level provided by cities or states or counties is quite different than the federal hazard pay. The good news is they don't conflict. I've had a lot of viewers say, can I get one and then get the other? Yes. Ultimately, you need to inquire whether or not your state, county, or city has hazard pay and apply for it. Every state is quite different. Next, a lot of viewers in the comments yesterday said, my employer said this and my employer said that. Ultimately, what you need to understand with the federal version of hazard pay, which I'll be getting to shortly, it's not so much what your employer says, but their mindset is critical. Hazard pay is very well defined and clear under the second stimulus package. And so the employer may simply not want to give it to you, but it's not for them to determine whether or not you're essential. The bill actually says what is essential. So under the federal proposal, which is the HEROES Act, subsection HEROES Fund, currently in the Senate from the House, it proposes hazard pay to essential workers. The bill defines essential workers under the bill. In the bill, it says that essential workers include pharmacists, grocery stores, shipping and receiving, drivers, that's private and municipal drivers, so Uber and Lyft, and also, local bus drivers, warehouses, distribution, maintenance of buildings, cleaning services. Those are very well defined, and dentists. The dentists have their own provision in there. I don't know how they got it. It literally says just dentists. So it literally has well-defined sections. It has sections that are clearly not well-defined, and I've gone over those, and boy, I call those the gray area. Walmart, Costco, Target, CVS, Walgreens, Sam's Clubs, all those type of places are really not well defined. Because I've had viewers that said, hey, I worked in Walmart's pharmacy. Well, no, excuse me. I worked inside of Walmart near the pharmacy, but not in the pharmacy. Am I qualified? The confusion is that the bill talks about the name of the location, but not the task. So Walmart is not a pharmacist. It's not a pharmacy, but it sometimes has a pharmacy in it, and so does Costco. And it's also not a grocery store, but has a grocery store in there. So what happens? Ultimately, the spirit of the bill in a separate memo, which we detailed exclusively on this channel, says that the spirit is to give more people hazard pay and not defeat people on hazard pay. But the future of hazard pay is so critical in a new statement issued moments ago. Josh Bivens, who's director of research at the Left Learning Economic Policy Institute, estimates that not providing an extension of FPUC, which I'm getting to in another video, $600 per week, and ending hazard or not providing hazard pay would severely hurt the American economy. He said enhanced unemployment insurance, which is FPUC, UI, PUA, combined with hazard pay for essential workers and strengthened job standards, safety standards, are, quote, good economics and good health policy as many Americans face the choice of an unsafe work or poverty. Now, I want you to understand what he's getting at there, because this is so critical, and I hope both political parties understand this. As the pandemic picks up, essential workers may not wish to work in their essential place of work because they don't want to get sick and they're not being compensated extra to get sick. What am I talking about? Well, when the pandemic first hit, a lot of us just didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how serious it was. We didn't know if it was going to continue. We didn't know everything about it. Now we know a lot more about it. And there are new reports that say that essential workers may not want to work in essential workplaces anymore because they're hazardous places and because they're not being paid hazard pay. And so there may be a flee of those people from those jobs to ultimately go to unemployment or go to another type of job, leaving those jobs unstaffed and ultimately hurting the American economy. Here's an example. Grocery stores, which, we don't inherently think is dangerous, but being in a grocery store during a pandemic is a hazard pay environment. You are an essential worker. So if you're at that cash register ringing things up and behind a plexiglass, you qualify as a hazard pay worker under the hazard pay bill. You also qualify for hazard pay in some states, and in some cases are part of a hazard pay payment system that has been negotiated by unions. Here's an example. Kroger, who's here in Los Angeles, owns, across the country as well, owns Ralph's and things like that. They have paid hazard pay, but now that the pandemic's picking up, the unions, because Kroger is unionized as a unionized supermarket, are asking to ensure that hazard pay is paid going forward for their employees. Well, guess what happens if the employer says, I don't want to pay you hazard pay? I'm not saying that Kroger's saying that. But let's say that an employer says, I'm not going to pay hazard pay. New reports say that a lot of those workers just may not return. They may say, hey, I am not going to die because you don't want to compensate me for hazard pay. And so ultimately, you may have these essential jobs at places we need to go to, like supermarkets, may not have employees, and they may end up shutting down. That is why hazard pay, economically, is so critically to be passed, because if you don't pay hazard pay, the places may ultimately implode and shut down because no one wants to work in a hazard environment and not be compensated for it. Employees are not stupid. Yesterday's video that we detailed shows the severity of the situation, but also the good news about it. Employees like you are getting savvy. And so a lot of them are saying, hey, you don't want to pay me hazard pay? Right now from a state or local level, I'm going to another job in which I am not at risk. And so a lot of them are doing call center jobs at home, making more money and not working in a hazardous environment. But that ultimately causes corrosion and implosion of the U.S. economy because we need certain places to remain open. And if we don't have employees working them, they will go belly up. So that's what Josh Bivens is referring to. Mark Mazur, who's director of the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center, said in a statement minutes ago obtained by LALATE that letting enhanced insurance, which is FPUC, that's $600 per week, expire outright, meaning expire this week and not get reinstituted in August, quote, almost certainly would deepen and prolong the recession, perhaps greatly. Whether not extending the jobless benefits, sending direct checks, offering rent and mortgage relief, or some combination of the three, poses the risk that consumer spending drops precipitously, and there are large numbers of foreclosures and mortgage defaults, and many Americans go hungry. So, hazard pay is not... here is my rant. Hazard pay is not this sort of get-rich scheme that Democrats are devising for essential workers. No. It is something so critical for an economic standpoint that if you don't compensate people who are putting their lives at risk, they may not work. Those industries may collapse, and we may not have those industries which we need to have in a pandemic. Imagine not having grocery stores staffed because you're not paying hazard pay. Imagine not having home improvement stores staffed because you're not paying hazard pay. What will happen is you will literally have an economic implosion, and people will struggle, you and I, because we try to go to those essential places and they won't be operating because no one paid them hazard pay. So how do you calculate hazard pay? When it will come to you? What is the numbers? And let me get right to it. So hazard pay is $10,000 if up to $10,000 if you made $100,000 or less last year. It is $5,000 if you made over $100,000 last year. How is it calculated? How do you get the money? Where does it go? Okay, so hazard pay is paid $13 an hour based upon the number of hours you work from January up to the present. So you take your hourly, overtime, and normal hourly, take all that money, times it by $13 an hour, you get a number. If that number is over $10,000 and you qualify, bam, you get a lump sum. Pretty easy, right? If you don't make $10,000, if you're under the threshold, don't worry. You would get that amount as a lump sum. And then going forward, you would get $13 an hour if you continue to work as an essential worker. Common questions I get are, I have multiple jobs as an essential worker. They all apply. Furloughed, fired, laid off, you still get it. The person who worked essential died, still get it. The survivor gets it. So very, very simple. The $5,000 is basically if you made a lot of money last year, we're going to pay you less. The part of the bill, which I absolutely hate, and you know what I'm about to say, is how you apply. You don't. The employer applies for you and doesn't have to apply, and it's voluntary. If they don't, there's no recourse. I don't like it. I think it's insane. I think it's crazy. I don't know if it's going to survive that way. I think it's going to have to get modified, the bill. Mitt Romney, who has an economic mind, has an economic background, has a financial background, understands that doesn't work. He understands it doesn't work for two regards. One, employees need the money, and you can't have it discretionary upon the employer to get the money for the employees. Second, you can't have the employer do it for free. I mean, it is so simple to realize that this is a lot of bookkeeping, and employers are not going to do stuff that costs them a lot of money in bookkeeping unless you compensate them for it. So Mitt Romney allocates a little bit of money, just enough to pay the employers to do the application for you, and requires them to do it for you, and requires them to get the money for you. Thank you, Mitt. I mean, it makes great sense. So ultimately what's going to happen in late July, if all the forces are correct in Congress, is that Mitt Romney's plan and the Democrats' plan will be combined together. They'll analyze them together. They'll debate them together. They'll cut and paste them together. But then then there's Michanse, the Republican proposal for a second stimulus package. As you know, Mitch McConnell and Steven Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary to Donald Trump, has been working on their second stimulus package. It will be the Republicans' answer to the second stimulus package. It has been drafted. It apparently was supposed to be released today. It has not. Perhaps it's tomorrow. And then will be introduced to Congress later this week. They're going on their grand tour to promote it. I call it the Michanse's tour. And we will see what they're going to say about hazard pay. Based upon the comments I said from the economists early on this report, boy, I mean, if you don't compensate essential workers and you're a Republican, I don't know what your excuse is. I really don't know what your excuse is. I mean, let me, and I'm not being partisan, I'm using their exact words. The Republicans have said we don't want to create a welfare state. We don't want people to stay at home and collect welfare checks. Well, these aren't hazard pay workers, are people working. So that argument doesn't work for not to pay hazard pay Republicans. They are working. So are you going to pay them because they're working? Or are you not going to pay them because they're working? The thing that a lot of viewers resonated with me earlier, I think it was on Saturday I said this. Republicans have said that they want a part of the second stimulus package, a provision that gives protections to business owners, employers, so they can't be sued because of the pandemic. Okay, I don't see anything wrong with it. On the other hand, you don't want to, the employer wants to have an unsafe work environment, doesn't want to be sued. Okay, well, are you paying hazard pay? You can't have your cake and eat it too. I mean, you really, really cannot have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, I don't want to pay unemployment extended benefits because people just stay at home. Well, my hazard pay essential workers are not staying at home, some of them, or haven't stayed entirely at home. That's why it's called hazard pay. They worked some hours. They don't have to work the entire, remember, for hazard pay, you don't have to work the entire pandemic. You could have worked January, February, March, and were laid off. You still qualify for hazard pay. But under the Republican plan, don't say to me that, hey, if you stay, I'm not going to pay you because you're just collecting benefits. No. Ultimately, $13 an hour on top of what people make for hazard pay is not a lot of money. It's not asking too much. It should be paid to them. It really has to be paid for them. It's an economic issue, and it's a fundamental issue to survive this pandemic. More lockdowns are going to be issued. the essential workers' jobs are even more important. There's a couple things that are so important as this pandemic gets worse. That is rent, being able to have food up to put on the table, be able to pay your utilities, and being ensured that that the essential workers who are working to keep this nation moving as lockdowns are issued are not at risk and are compensated appropriately for their jobs. So if you have comments to today's video, which I'm sure you do, drop them below. A lot of great stuff today. I want you to stay motivated. I want you to stay positive. I want you to stay focused. A lot of new developments coming out all this week. So with that, also stay with LALATE for more.